Monday morning, a thin fog like cigarette smoke still clung tightly to the ground as Aaliyah Moore stepped through Lincoln High School's gates in Maplewood, Ohio. She strolled back, straight eyes, scanning the schoolyard as if memorizing every detail, not out of curiosity but caution. This was the fourth time in 3 years she'd changed schools. Each time was a new beginning, a new disguise, and another piece of her past locked away behind her. Aaliyah was 17, not tall, not flashy, her neatly braided hair, light grey hoodie, faded jeans and small backpack. Everything about her seemed designed to blend into the crowd. No one noticed anything special about this quiet black girl, and that was precisely how she wanted it. No one should know, no one should guess, because if anyone found out that she had once been the Michigan State Youth MMA champion with 23 matches, 21 wins, even taking down opponents twice her size, everything would change. They would see her as dangerous. Her mother, Dr. Monica Moore, had pleaded with her daughter, "Leave it all behind, Aaliyah. I want us to live a normal life. Not every place accepts your kind of strength." And Aaliyah had nodded, not because she wanted to hide who she was, but because of the exhaustion in her mother's eyes. But it wasn't easy to be ordinary when you've been trained not to fear anyone, when your hands once knew how to neutralize a punch before it landed, when you deeply understand what happens when someone seemingly powerless decides to stand up. In her first class, she chose the last seat, spoke as little as possible, smiled when necessary, stayed quiet when unnoticed. Every gaze passed over her like a shadow, and Aaliyah was comfortable with that. But deep inside her chest, beneath the oversized hoodie, was a heart that wouldn't rest. One that still echoed with the sounds of the Detroit gym, where punches into heavy bags were a means of survival, not sport. Where Aaliyah, at just 12 years old, had stood up after her first group beating and vowed no one would ever touch her again. Now she was starting over, a new school, strange faces, an environment she didn't yet know would smile or bite. But either way, Aaliyah was ready. Not to fight back, but to never bow her head, and she had no idea that in just a few days the name Aaliyah Moore would become something that silenced the whole school whenever spoken. Not out of fear, but respect. The first lunch at Lincoln High wasn't much different from any other school. Loud chatter, the mingling smells of food with the clatter of metal trays and the curious glances toward the new girl. Aaliyah picked a vacant table in the farthest corner of the cafeteria where the lights didn't shine too brightly, where no one paid attention to anyone else. She opened the lunchbox her mother had packed carefully, picking at each small bite as if conversing silently with herself. But that quiet didn't last. 3 figures approached. The first was tall, broad-shouldered, with a buzz cut and a swagger in his step. That was Zach Coleman, football team captain, son of a wealthy local business owner and the school's unofficial king. Following him were Tyler Small, with a constant squint like he was always searching for a weakness, and Brent Lanky with a perpetual half-smirk, as if mocking the whole world. Zach didn't say a word as he pulled out a chair across from Aaliyah. He didn't need to introduce himself. The way he leaned back, bracing on the chair with a hard stare, made one thing clear: he was used to control, and he hated being ignored. "Hey there, new girl," Zach said loud enough for a few nearby tables to hear. Name Aaliyah lifted her head. Her eyes met his. 1 second, 2 seconds. No anger, no submission, just a cold, flat gaze like a mirror. "Aaliyah," she replied, her voice no louder than necessary. "Detroit," Tyler sneered. "Oh, you think you're tougher than us, huh?" "I don't think that," Aaliyah replied calmly, continuing her lunch. "But you do," Zach interjected. Coming from Detroit, you probably think we country folks are easy to push around. By now, a few more eyes had turned toward their table. No one spoke, but the background music in the cafeteria seemed to quieten just a bit. Aaliyah set her spoon down. "I didn't come here to push anyone around," she said. Zach tilted his head, squinting as if he'd just heard a joke. "Listen, Aaliyah. Around here, we've got rules. Newcomers learn to adapt, especially those from loud cities like Detroit. You should show some respect." He smiled, like contributing to the new Student Protection Fund. $5 a day for your piece. The 17-year-old black girl who had once stood toe-to-toe with opponents twice her size in the ring looked straight at Zach. She let out a soft breath, not of fear, but restraint. "I don't want trouble," she said quietly, pushing back her chair to leave. Brent stepped in, blocking her path, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. "We're not done here, sweetheart." Aaliyah froze. That touch, though light, triggered something old inside her. The part she had locked away with her promise to her mother. She inhaled deeply one more time. "What is it you guys want?" Her voice was deeper now, more unmistakable. Zach smiled, his eyes like a predator spotting prey. "We want respect. And you've got until tomorrow to think about it. But don't be stupid and tell a teacher everyone here's a friend of mine, and my dad sponsors the football team." The three walked off. Aaliyah remained seated, fists clenched beneath the table. No one knew that a single left hook from her, a move Coach Ray Dawson once called velvet-wrapped steel, could have knocked Zach out cold. But the promise still stood, and she was still trying to be just another girl. A cold calculation surfaced in her mind. $5 a day meant $150 a month, over $1,000 a year. But the real cost wasn't money, it was patience. And she knew someone like Zach would never stop if met with softness. The next day, the skies over Maplewood were neither sunny nor rainy, just a dull, unbroken grey, as if mirroring Aaliyah's mood. She walked into school, trying to keep everything normal, walk straight, avoid eye contact, focus on her work. But she knew it couldn't last. And sure enough, that day's lunch shattered the inertia of silence. Aaliyah had just sat at her usual corner table when noise near the cafeteria doors rippled outward like waves. Zach Coleman was striding toward her this time, not alone, but flanked by nearly half the football team, muscular faces, wrinkled, athletic shirts, and mocking eyes. "Aaliyah," Zach called loudly, his voice echoing through the closed space. "Heard you haven't made your decision. Thought I'd come check." He stopped right in front of her, hands in pockets, a lazy smirk on his lips. Zach, Aaliyah replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "I just want to go to school in peace. I don't want any trouble. And Zach leaned close to her face, "just want you to understand the rules here. When someone ignores me, it makes me look bad. You get that right?" Then in front of the cafeteria, he slowly picked up the lunch tray, a steaming bowl of soup and a fresh salad, and dumped them straight into her lap. The red and yellow soup soaked her old jeans, dripping onto the floor in puddles. A carrot slice slid off her thigh and landed on her shoe like a punctuation mark of humiliation. A snicker broke out, then another, and suddenly the whole cafeteria erupted in laughter, a storm of indifference. Zach feigned concern. "Oh no, clumsy me, she's all wet now. Somebody get a towel for the Detroit girl." Sarcastic claps rang out from a nearby table. One student held up a phone recording the scene, capturing a soaked girl sitting silently, eyes unblinking. But Aaliyah didn't react. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She slowly stood up, letting the streaks of soup drip down, soak into her shoes, and slide onto the cold tile floor. And amid the laughter, she said one thing, not loud, but enough to hush the room. You just made a big mistake, Zach Coleman. Zach raised an eyebrow. Oh, gonna tell the principal, call your mummy. Aaliyah didn't answer. She picked up her backpack, turned her back and walked away, leaving behind a trail of soup, a pungent smell and stunned stares that couldn't understand how such a small girl could walk away so upright after such a public shaming. She tried wiping off the stains in the bathroom, but her hands were trembling, not from shame, but from rage held in too long. 4 years of training hadn't just taught her how to throw a punch, it had taught her when to throw it. And this time the line had been crossed. She pulled out her phone and searched for a name she hadn't called. The phone rang, and then a deep voice answered Ray Dawson speaking. "It's me, Aaliyah," she said. "I need a real conversation." My girl coach, Ray Dawson's voice came through, deep and warm, as if time and distance had never existed between them. "How's the new school?" Aaliyah took a deep breath, still staring into the foggy mirror in the restroom, seeing the reflection of a drenched girl with stained clothes, but her eyes unbroken. "Not great," she answered. "Some people like to control everything through intimidation. And today, I was humiliated, in front of the whole school." There was a pause on the other end. Then Ray asked softly but firmly, "Did you hit him?" "Not yet," Aaliyah replied, her voice nearly emotionless. "Because I promised my mom. No trouble, no fighting, no standing out." Ray let out a quiet sigh. He'd known Aaliyah since she was a 12-year-old skinny and trembling who'd walked into the gym after being jumped by a group of students. He'd watched her take hold of that pain and forge it into strength. Not the kind of strength to attack, but to survive. "You know," he said, "there are places where people respect you for your skills. And there are places where they fear that same thing. Your mum's not wrong for wanting to protect you, but neither are you if you feel you can't keep bowing forever." Aaliyah looked into her own eyes in the mirror. No more anger, just a cold, steady clarity. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she said. "I just don't want to be or see anyone else become a punching bag for people who think they're entitled." Ray was silent for a few seconds, then he spoke slowly and clearly, "Then do it the right way. Not in the classroom, not in front of a crowd, and never out of hate. You know how to control your strikes and make someone remember it for life without breaking bones. Use that skill like a mirror, show him who he is." Aaliyah nodded as if she'd heard that truth in her heart long ago. "I remember," she said. "Always respect your opponent even when they don't deserve it. And victory isn't about hitting the hardest, it's about making them understand the consequence." "That's right," Ray said with a quiet laugh. "And Aaliyah, yes, you have the right to protect yourself. No one can take that from you, not even the people you love. If you feel the time has come, don't ask for permission. Just act." Her heart was calm again when she hung up, but not gentle. She no longer trembled or endured like a shadow drifting through the halls. She walked upright, her gaze steady, and when the dismissal bell rang, Aaliyah didn't rush to leave the school. She stayed behind in the library, pretending to do homework. But she was waiting for the right moment. And Zach Coleman. Around 4 p.m., when only a few cars were scattered across the campus, Aaliyah quietly stepped out to the parking lot behind the athletic wing. It was the route she knew he would take after football practice, after the crowd was gone, and after there'd be no one around to witness or to protect him. No one in that school knew that the girl drenched in soup yesterday was preparing for a battle whose outcome had already been written. The late Maplewood sun cast pale light across the parking lot behind the sports wing. Only a few teacher vehicles remained, their shadows stretched long beside the lampposts. The atmosphere was still unnervingly as if the school was holding its breath for what was to come. Aaliyah leaned against the wall, arms folded across her chest. Her eyes followed every movement behind the tall glass windows of the athletic building. Inside football practice was ending. She saw the broad shoulders, the muddy cleats, and finally Zach Coleman emerged. Alone. Carrying his bag in both hands, walking with the same cocky confidence as if the entire town belonged to him. He walked out unhurried until his eyes locked on Aaliyah. He froze, then smirked. "Well, if it isn't Soup Girl, here to pay your late fee." Aaliyah stepped out of the shadows, strolling toward him. "We need to talk." Zach laughed louder. "Talk? You think you're in a position to negotiate?" He dropped his bag to the ground, folded his arms towering over her by at least 1.5 feet. "Or did you come to beg me to take the video down?" "No," Aaliyah replied, her eyes never leaving his, not for a second. "I came to make an offer." Zach frowned. "What one-on-one, right here? No audience, no cameras, no rules. If you win, I'll pay $10 daily and do whatever you want." "But if I win," Aaliyah paused, her voice dropping like a quiet blade. "You leave me alone and apologize to me in front of the whole school." Zach laughed like he'd just heard the funniest joke of his life. "You want to fight me? I've played football since I was 10. My coach was in the NFL. I bench 300 pounds. And you?" He eyed her from head to toe. "You look like a stiff breeze could blow you over." Aaliyah shrugged. "Then you've got nothing to worry about." That sentence made the smirk on Zach's face falter for a split second. Something was in her eyes so calm, it was cold, as if she wasn't bluffing. As if she already knew the outcome. He rolled his shoulders, lips curling. "Fine. But remember, no rules. I'm not taking responsibility." "No need," Aaliyah said. "I'm in control." They both stepped into the open stretch of the parking lot where no cars were parked, just smooth asphalt and long evening shadows. Zach peeled off his hoodie, revealing a bulky gym-sculpted frame, years of lifting and training. He stood proud. Aaliyah, in contrast, removed her jacket, revealing a plain black t-shirt, sleeves rolled up her frame, lean but balanced like a blade held upright. "Last chance to back out," Zach said, almost pitying. "Thanks." But no, Aaliyah stood, relaxed arms at her sides, palms open, eyes steady. Zach didn't wait. He lunged forward like a wave, throwing a punch straight at her face, fast, powerful, and full of confidence. He thought one hit would be enough, but in that split second, everything collapsed. Aaliyah didn't dodge. She slipped half a step to the side, just the width of her shoulders, her right arm folded up to block, not hurried, not panicked, precise like a machine. And just as Zach's arm continued its forward momentum, her left fist shot out, piston-like, slamming into the spot just below his sternum, the solar plexus. The punch wasn't significant, but the force condensed from 4 years of training, thousands of practice hours, and all the anger she'd stored was enough to bring Zach Coleman to his knees like a hollow sandbag. He clutched his stomach, dropped to one knee, gasping like a fish out of water. His diaphragm seized. His eyes bulged from lack of oxygen. His massive frame curled up like a child in severe pain. Aaliyah didn't advance. She stood there, calmly regulating her breath, her expression no longer angry but deeply serene, as if what had happened was something that should have happened long ago. Zach wheezed, "Who are you?" Aaliyah leaned down, their eyes level. "Aaliyah Moore," she said. "Michigan State Youth MMA champion, 23 fights, 21 wins. And the most interesting part," she tilted her head, whispering like a reminder, "I used less than 1/10 of my strength." Then she stood, turned, picked up her jacket, and left Zach Coleman, writhing in shattered pride, alone in the parking lot, with no witnesses, but a defeat he would never forget. Lincoln High's hallways weren't filled with idle chatter the next morning. They buzzed with whispers, exchanged glances, and had one topic: Zach Coleman. He hadn't come to school with his usual swagger, and when he finally showed up in third period, he said nothing, looked at no one, and wasn't accompanied by Tyler or Brent. That silence became a rumor. But then something no one expected happened right in the middle of lunch break. With the cafeteria packed to the brim, Zach walked in, headed straight for Aaliyah's table, where she sat alone as usual. No one spoke, no one laughed. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Zach stood there and took a deep breath, and in a voice stripped of any arrogance, he said loud enough for the entire cafeteria to hear, "I want to apologize for what happened yesterday, for humiliating you, for being a total asshole." Aaliyah looked up. Her eyes held no anger, no gloating, only composure, like still water after a storm. She didn't respond right away, and that silence made Zach's apology ring even clearer amid hundreds of stunned stares. "I was wrong," he continued, "and I deserved what I got." His voice didn't tremble, but there was no armor left. Only the truth. Bare, late. Aaliyah stood. She didn't say, "I forgive you." She didn't humiliate him further. She gave a slight nod and said, "I accept your apology." Then she walked away without looking back. But the cafeteria remained still, as if they needed a few more moments to process what had just happened. No one laughed. No one clapped. But every eye that looked at her had changed. No longer the gaze for the new girl or the victim of a prank, but one of respect, pure, unpretending respect. From that day on, Zach Coleman wasn't a name people feared anymore, but a name that reminded everyone mistakes can be repaired if you're brave enough to admit them. And more surprisingly, he stopped bothering Aaliyah and became someone who started intervening when others were being bullied in the hidden corners of the school. One day, a freshman nervously asked Zach, "Did she beat you up real bad?" Zach just smiled and shook his head. "No, she didn't beat me up. She left me just enough pride to learn how to grow up." And so in that small school, the old rules where the strong trampled the weak began to crack. All because a quiet black girl chose not to bow and not to take revenge either. The story of Zach Coleman's public apology spread through Lincoln High faster than any schoolyard rumor ever had. But what people remembered most wasn't the punch, but Aaliyah's response afterward. No boasting, no score settling. She still ate lunch alone, still stayed silent in class, still turned down the over-eager glances of admiration. But everyone knew no one would dare call her the new girl from Detroit anymore. A few days later, as Aaliyah was leaving the library one late afternoon, she saw a group of 4 girls hesitating in the hallway. One of them, a brown-haired girl with a determined and tense look, stepped forward. "You're Aaliyah Moore, right?" Her voice was unsure, but it was clear she'd thought hard before speaking. Aaliyah nodded. The girl looked back at her friends, then turned again, mustering all her courage. "My name's Brianna Lewis. There's a rumor that you used to train in MMA and that you helped someone beat up a group of students from another school." "The rumor's partly true," Aaliyah answered calmly. Brianna looked her straight in the eyes, this time with no hesitation. "We need help." Then it all poured out. A group of male students from West Side School gathered at the bus stop every afternoon. It started with teasing, then became vulgar comments, leering stares, and recently unwanted physical contact. Yesterday, one of them, Derek White, their ringleader, had grabbed Brianna's hand when she tried to step back. He laughed and said, "Next time you won't be able to run." They had reported it to teachers, but no one did anything since it happened off campus. and telling their parents that would only get them grounded, not solve anything. Aaliyah was silent for a moment. Then she asked a straightforward question. How many of them? 5, Brianna replied. They're all about 17 or 18, but there are usually 4 of us walking together. Aaliyah nodded. Tomorrow just go like usual. I'll be there. Brianna blinked. You mean, not to fight, Aaliyah said, but to see if it's necessary. The next afternoon, exactly at 3:45 p.m., at the old bus stop with its cold metal benches, Aaliyah sat alone, holding a book, but her eyes never left the far corner. Brianna and the other 3 girls arrived a few minutes later. They huddled off to one side, tense hearts pounding. Then they came. 5 boys in athletic jackets, shoulders broad, eyes cocky. The one in front, Derek White, had close-cropped blonde hair and a faded neck tattoo. He swaggered over, immediately grinning when he saw Brianna's group. Well, well, our little princesses showed up again. Don't run this time, yeah. He reached to stroke Brianna's cheek, but before he could touch her, a voice cut in clear and calm. Back off. Derek turned. Aaliyah had stood and stepped forward, her eyes steady. They don't want to talk to you, neither do I, he sneered. And who are you, new girl? Their little bodyguard. One of the boys behind him shouted. She looks like she'd snap in a breeze, and she's got a mouth on her. You should walk away, Derek growled. Don't get involved. Aaliyah didn't answer, just stared. That looked cold, like a blade made him hesitate a beat. But like most bullies who used to be in power, he laughed loudly. What do you think you're gonna do? Another boy, stocky, brown-haired, stepped forward and put a hand on Aaliyah's shoulder. Mistake. In a single breath, Aaliyah pivoted her left elbow, smashing into his gut, right at the solar plexus. He folded, gasping, like the air had been sucked out of him, and dropped to the ground like a sack of wet flour. Derek didn't even have time to react before Aaliyah's fist landed. A liver shot, then a left knee came up slamming into his face. He went flying backward, nose bleeding like a leaking faucet, landing flat on the pavement. The remaining 3 froze. No one moved. No one could believe it. That skinny girl had taken out 2 big guys in under 10 seconds and was now standing there entirely composed. Anyone else? Aaliyah asked, eyes scanning the trio. No answer. She nodded. Smart. Now get out of here. If I ever see any of you near them again, the next conversation won't be this easy. They scrambled to pick up Derek and the boy, still groaning on the ground, then ran off down the street. Brianna and her friends rush over only after their shadows disappear around the corner. Who are you, one of them asked, eyes wide. Aaliyah looked at them and smiled for the first time with a genuine smile. I'm just someone who doesn't like seeing the weak get crushed. That day, after Derek's crew was beaten and forced to retreat, the story spread like wildfire. Some heard it from Brianna. Others saw a blurry video taken from far away Fuzzy, but clear enough to show Derek White, the infamous West Side thug, lying defeated at the feet of a small black girl. And once again, the name Aaliyah Moore made Lincoln High fall silent when spoken. But more importantly, those girls were protected. Not by a phone call, not by an adult, but by the courage of one of their own. But not everyone accepts defeat. 3 days later, Derek came back. This time he wasn't joking. He showed up at Lincoln High with a group of unfamiliar men. No uniforms, clearly not students, waiting for Aaliyah at the end of the hallway after school. Brianna and her friends saw them panicked and ran to find Aaliyah. But by the time they got there, it was too late. She was already there, alone. That's enough, Derek, Aaliyah said. Her voice wasn't loud, but rang clearly through the empty hallway. You've been warned. You humiliated me, Derek growled, flanked by three thuggish-looking guys in their late teens or early 20s. Today I take my dignity back. And you think dragging three oversized goons along is how to do that? Aaliyah looked at them, not stepping back an inch. Pathetic. Derek nodded. One charged first fast, big, swinging a brutal hook. But Aaliyah had seen that kind of instinctive move too many times before. She ducked low, twisted her hips, and swept his legs out from under him with a clean, powerful kick. He crashed to the ground hard, the groan from his lungs sounding like a muffled curse. The second guy came from the right. Aaliyah clinched him, pulled his head down into range and drove her knee straight into his face. Blood sprayed from his nose as he staggered and crumpled into the lockers like a broken mannequin. Derek roared and charged with the last guy. But Aaliyah was already in complete control. She slipped left, causing the fourth guy to ram headfirst into a locker. And Derek, thinking his strength would dominate, caught a sharp jab to the chest near the heart. It knocked the air from his lungs for a moment. She didn't stop. A quick spin, a left hook to the jaw, then a snapping back kick, all in under 10 seconds. By the time the distant sound of a teacher's footsteps echoed down the hall, it looked like a battlefield. 4 grown men groaning on the floor, and Aaliyah was barely winded with not a single bead of sweat on her forehead. A teacher arrived just in time, eyes wide in shock. What on earth happened here? Aaliyah stood among the bodies, calm as ever. Self-defense, sir. And this time no one doubted her, because the hallway cameras had captured everything. The footage spread like wildfire inside the school and across town. Local news, statewide student forums, and even a small TV network covered the story of a small black girl who didn't provoke or start a fight, but stood alone to protect justice in a chaotic school world. At Lincoln High that day became a turning point. No more bullying, no more thugs roaming the halls, and if anyone dared to try one glance from Aaliyah Moore was enough to silence the threat. After the hallway incident where Aaliyah single-handedly disabled 4 attackers without leaving lasting injuries, the whole school seemed to wake up. The kids who used to keep their heads down, avoid trouble, and suffer in silence, started looking at each other differently. The fear was no longer constant. Now a question lingered in their minds. If Aaliyah could do it, why can't I stand up for myself? The next morning, when Aaliyah arrived at school, a group of students was already waiting outside her classroom. At the front stood Brianna Lewis, no longer the hesitant girl from the bus stop incident. Aaliyah, she said firmly, we want to learn, not to fight, but to learn how to stand our ground. Can you teach us? Aaliyah was silent for a moment, then she nodded. Within a week, the after-school self-defense class was officially formed. It started small with Brianna, the 3 other girls from the bus stop, and a few curious students. They trained in the old gym, borrowed mats from the wrestling room, and sometimes had to pack up quickly to make way for PE classes. But no one complained. Each day a few more students joined. Aaliyah didn't just teach technique, she taught mindset. How to stand in a way that keeps you from being shoved down. How to read an opponent's movement through their shoulders and hips. How do you scream to draw attention during danger at the right moment? And most importantly, self-defense doesn't start with a punch. It starts the moment you say, I don't accept this. Her voice was never raised, but everyone heard her. Because Aaliyah didn't teach like a coach, she taught like someone who had lived, tasted, and risen above it. Soon the class became too crowded. More than 50 students signed up, boys, girls, former victims, and even a few ex-bullies now training with awkward but honest intent. Teachers began to notice. Principal Mr. Carter visited one session, stood silently for an hour, then called Aaliyah into his office. You've created something no curriculum ever could, he said, unable to hide his admiration. The school will give you a dedicated room, new mats, and even hire a supporting coach. But the leader has to be you. Aaliyah nodded, but she didn't smile. She understood. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was responsibility. This was the purpose. At the first session in the new training room, she entered to find over 40 students already lined up ready. She looked at each face. Girls carry emotional scars, boys who once masked fear behind icy expressions. She didn't ask why they came. She only said, "Today we learn to punch." But the reason behind that punch, you've already had it for a long time, and I'll teach you how to carry it inside like a fire. Not to burn others, but to make sure your light never goes out. Rumors about Aaliyah Moore's self-defense class didn't stop at Lincoln High. Parents started asking. A few teachers even asked to join. The community of Maplewood, quiet and often distant from school affairs, began to notice. And then the opportunity came. Not something Aaliyah sought, but something that came knocking. A statewide MMA organization held a showcase event at the city's sports center, inviting young fighters, amateur champions, and especially talent scouts. Among the crowd were many Lincoln High students. And like a ripple turning into a wave, the name Aaliyah Moore started echoing through the arena when the host announced, "We're opening the floor for anyone willing to spar in full protective gear, no head strikes. Who will represent Lincoln?" The chants rose, "Aaliyah, Aaliyah, Aaliyah." She stood in the crowd hesitating, not from fear, but because the old feeling crept back. Those eyes are watching. The pressure, the overwhelming attention. Then her eyes met Brianna's in the front row, a gaze filled not with hope for victory, but with trust. Aaliyah nodded. A tall man in a black shirt with the event's logo approached. "You're Aaliyah Moore?" "Yes. I'm Dean Walker, former lightweight champion, now head of scouting for the Federal Youth League. Someone said you were the young champ from Michigan." "Used to be," Aaliyah replied. "Now I'm just a student." "Well, today," he said with a half smile, "are you ready for a light sparring match? Your opponent will be Nicole Carter, 20 years old and a top 3 amateur in the state right now." Aaliyah answered with just one sentence, "I'm ready." In the locker room, as she strapped on her protective gear, tightened her gloves and tied her hair back, every sound from the outside world seemed to fade away. Only her heartbeat remained, not from nervousness, but from a deep sense of returning, not to the fight, but to herself. No hiding, no compromising. As she stepped into the ring, she saw Nicole taller, stronger, with the sculpted body of a seasoned fighter. "Don't worry," Nicole said, while warming up, "we're just sparring for show." Aaliyah nodded silently, because she knew that for some people, even a performance is a chance to dominate. The bell rang. Nicole attacked first with 3 fast jabs, followed by a smooth roundhouse kick to the ribs. The speed and precision drew cheers from the crowd. But Aaliyah didn't flinch. She stepped back half a stride, caught Nicole's leg mid-air, and swept the other effortlessly. Nicole fell hard to the mat, disbelief in her eyes. The crowd fell silent. Aaliyah moved forward immediately, taking the fight to the ground and locking Nicole into a flawless triangle choke. Nicole struggled, twisted, and fought to escape, but in seconds her hand tapped the mat in surrender. It took less than 40 seconds. The arena erupted. Cheers exploded like a wave. The students of Lincoln High roared. Dean Walker rushed over, eyes wide. Where did you train, Detroit?" Coach Ray Dawson's gym, Aaliyah replied. Dean nodded slowly. I know him. He's not the type to praise anyone easily. Now I see why he trained someone like you. He offered her a card and invited her to join the professional development circuit. But Aaliyah glanced at the crowd, the students cheering for her, the small faces full of admiration, and her mother, Dr. Monica Moore, sitting far in the back, eyes glistening with pride. She handed the card back. "Thank you, but I'm not ready for that path. Right now, I have something more important to do, helping those around me learn not to be afraid." Dean said nothing more. He understood and bowed his head in quiet respect. That day, it wasn't just a fighter who earned recognition, it was an entire community proving that real strength doesn't always come from the ring, but from how you choose to use it. 3 days after the exhibition match, Aaliyah returned to Lincoln High as usual, quiet, humble, and unchanged. But the world outside had already begun to shift. She didn't know that in the shadows, a cowardly retaliation was taking shape. On a Tuesday morning, just as she set her backpack down, Principal Carter entered the classroom, his face as heavy as a storm. "Aaliyah, come with me. Right now." A man in a grey suit waited in the meeting room, holding a leather briefcase. "I'm Jason Whitmore, legal representative for the White family. They've filed charges against Aaliyah Moore for aggravated assault, intentional battery, and endangering the public." Aaliyah didn't speak, but her chest tightened, not from fear, but sheer absurdity. Whitmore opened a laptop. "Here's the footage." The security camera video from the hallway was the moment she took down Derek and his gang. But the first part, the threats, Derek's approach, and his first strike were missing. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," Mr. Carter began, but Whitmore cut him off. "The law is the law, sir, and it doesn't rely on sympathy." The White family with connections to school board members didn't stop at criminal charges. They petitioned for Aaliyah's suspension, labeling her dangerous, uncontrollable, and a bad influence. News of this spread faster than her MMA victory. Tabloids ran wild teen fighter causes, school chaos, self-defense, or street violence. Aaliyah Moore, hero or hidden threat. The media swarmed Lincoln High. Reporters hovered like vultures ambushing students outside. "Do you feel safe with her at school?" Some students, once silent, began speaking. A few who had felt intimidated by Aaliyah now said, "Sure, she can control her strength." "But what if one day she doesn't?" A conservative teacher added, "This isn't a cage match. Schools need rules, not rogue warriors." Brianna and Aaliyah's friends tried launching an online campaign in her defense, but their accounts were flagged and temporarily suspended. Aaliyah didn't speak. She didn't post, didn't plead. She kept silent and taught her self-defense class after school, though attendance thinned. Fear of backlash spread. Finally, the district board issued a 10-day suspension pending investigation. Dr. Monica Moore left the ER to be at the school. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply said in a voice like steel, "You're punishing my daughter for refusing to be a victim." Aaliyah took the suspension letter and exited the back gate to avoid reporters. But as she stepped out, nearly 50 students were waiting. No one said a word. They held hand-painted signs that read, "We stand with Aaliyah." A ninth-grade boy stepped forward with his phone. "I saved the original video, the full thing. My phone caught everything. I sent it to Fox Local." Aaliyah looked at him. She didn't speak, but her eyes said it all, gratitude and an unshakable will. The following Monday, the morning broadcast of Fox Local opened with a headline, "Exclusive footage reveals truth in Aaliyah Moore case." All of Maplewood watched holding their breath. The full uncut video aired. Derek White was seen approaching Few first, threatening, provoking, and striking. Every word, frame, and second that had been cut are now laid bare before the public. The ninth grader Jalen Pierce, who posted it with the caption, "The Truth Uncut," became an overnight name in town. When asked why he did it, Jalen said, "I once watched my friend get bullied, and no one stood up for him. Aaliyah didn't just stand up, she taught us that silence carries responsibility too." The video spread like a tidal wave. Major news outlets such as CBS, USA Today, and even regional CNN picked it up. Public opinion shifted sharply. Those who once criticized Aaliyah now fell silent. And within 48 hours of mounting pressure, the district office officially withdrew the suspension and launched an internal investigation into the opposing attorneys tampering with evidence. Attorney Whitmore quietly withdrew. The White family issued no further statements. And Derek himself, the one who once taunted, struck, and fell before Aaliyah, transferred schools in silence. Meanwhile, Aaliyah Moore returned to Lincoln High to thunderous applause. No longer just a quiet hero, she had become a symbol not of brute strength, but of integrity, calm resolve, and the ability to reshape a system through sheer determination. Principal Carter held a full school assembly. He stepped onto the stage, eyes glistening. "In 20 years of education, I've never seen a student make an entire community reflect the way she has. Today, we don't just welcome Aaliyah back, we welcome a new generation, one where students learn to protect each other with wisdom, courage, and honesty." Then, in a move without precedent, he handed Aaliyah the charter to establish a new club, the Lincoln High Self-Defense and Character Education Club, led by her. This club wouldn't just teach martial arts, it would teach students how to respond to injustice, understand their rights, and refuse to be victims in silence. Aaliyah was invited to speak at a county-wide education conference the following week. She stood before hundreds of teachers, parents, and policymakers. She didn't read a long speech, but shared a few quiet words. "I used to hide who I was. I thought if I were too strong, people would fear me. But then I realized, if I'm not strong, I can't protect those who aren't as strong as I am. Martial arts taught me how to fight. Life taught me how not to need to. And school should be the place we learn both." Her words ended in a standing ovation. But Aaliyah didn't linger. That same afternoon, she quietly returned to her self-defense class, where more than 70 students waited, eyes lighting up as she entered. She said nothing, just smiled, knelt, and tied her gloves. The fight never truly ends. But from that day on, she no longer fought alone. 3 years after Aaliyah Moore walked out of Lincoln High for the last time, her name still echoed through every new student orientation, every tour through the old brick hallways. Everyone knew the legend, the girl who stood up and brought a system to its knees. But few knew where she went, what she chose to do, and how she lived after the spotlight faded. The truth is, Aaliyah never went pro. Despite offers from 3 major MMA organizations and even a full scholarship to the University of Florida for applied martial arts, she turned them all down. Instead, she quietly enrolled in a small public college in Boston, majoring in psychology, focusing on adolescent behavior and social response. Not to escape, but to better understand what she once fought against. During her 4 years in college, she never entered another match. But every summer, she returned to Maplewood, not as an alumna, but as a guest lecturer at Lincoln High, where the self-defense class she once created had become an official course with a registered curriculum. Aaliyah didn't teach how to punch jaws or take down bullies. She taught how to face fear, how to rise without becoming cruel, how to hold on to kindness even in resistance. At 23, she earned her master's degree. That same year, she and her mother, Dr. Monica Moore, co-founded a non-profit called Not Just Strong. The organization brought self-defense, character education, and psychological support to more than 50 schools across Massachusetts. Her story was eventually written into a book titled "The Girl Who Didn't Fight to Win, She Fought to Be Heard." At 25, Aaliyah was invited to speak at a national summit on school reform. She brought no slides or statistics on stage among scientists, ministers, and behavioral experts. Just an old MMA glove, the one she wore at 17. She placed it on the podium and said, "The day I locked this glove away, I thought I'd never need it again. But I understood. Power doesn't lie in what you carry, it lies in what you choose to lay down. I laid down my fists to pick up my voice. I left the spotlight to walk into classrooms. I gave up glory to become someone who holds the light for others." The room rose not for a fighter, but for someone who never surrendered her dignity, even when fighting in the dark. Today at Lincoln High, there are clean mats, clear lessons, and a framed quote on the wall in the training room, once filled with sweat and fury. Not of Aaliyah in victory, but a handwritten line that reads, "Be strong, but never let strength cost you your kindness, A.M." And every child who once walked into that room with a bowed head walks out standing taller. Because there are victories that don't come from the ring, they come when you choose not to strike even when you can. Aaliyah Moore didn't become a world champion. She became a teacher for the children who didn't know how to defend themselves with words. She never sought fame, but quietly rebuilt a generation that bows to compassion, yet never to injustice. And if you ever think you're too small to make a difference, remember the girl who was once pushed out of a classroom seat, only to become the reason an entire school changed how it teaches dignity.